The reality is I care about making money so that I can live. I'm not out here to make $1 million. It'd be lovely to be able to afford all my medical bills and all my dental bills and my, living expenses and all that, and still have money left over to put toward good causes. But I think most of us are in the same boat of we just want to do good in the world while we're here. And I feel like bookstores are a major bastion of being able to do that. So the more that I can implement these systems to help me along and let you know about them, and hopefully that they are useful to you, I'm going to share them. Welcome to the Curious Cat Bookshop podcast, the podcast of the independent bookstore of Winsted, Connecticut, creating a literary community in Northwest Connecticut, bringing our local authors to the world and the world to our community in Northwest Connecticut. Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Curious Cat Bookshop podcast. It's taken me a little bit more time than I expected to be able to get back into the next season after ending our first season at the end of 2025, because I've been sick since New Year's Eve and I'm finally mostly better. I did do that kind of bonus episode in February where I barely had a voice, but kind of had one. But I'm really excited about this new season. Today, we're talking about systems that you need as a small business owner, particularly as a bookstore owner. I've talked about some of those systems before, particularly point of sale systems. And this is the first time I've done this, so I'm hoping that right here you will be able to see the link to that episode if you're watching this on YouTube. This season, today we're talking about systems, but this season we're going to be talking about, again, the whole life of a book, including the writing part of it. We're going to be talking to various authors. Next month in April, we're going to have Lindsay Denninger here to talk about her book that delves into the cultural impact of Gossip Girl. And we'll be taping that, and that will go up on the podcast when that's over. And then we're talking to Danny Adlerman, who is my former colleague from Lee & Low. He has been working in book production for more than 30 years, and he has such a wealth of information about the physical making of a book. He can tell you about working with printing presses. He can tell you about paper shortages and choosing paper. He is the guy who we would always go to and say, Danny, I want my book to physically look like this. How do I accomplish that? So we're going to talk with Danny about all those physical aspects of making a book. I know that a lot of self-published authors just don't have the experience to know what goes into that physical making of a book. So it's going to be really fascinating if you're a self-published author to be talking to him. And I think that anybody who, I just listened to a Planet Money podcast episode on the making of their book. I highly recommend that you go pop by it. Last week's episode was on how they went from project proposal to a book auction with their agents. And next week, as of the taping of this, they're going to be talking about the editorial process. So I recommend that you go and listen to that if you don't know anything about the publishing process at a publishing house, especially in nonfiction, because it's a little bit different from fiction. They sold their book on proposal and now they've got to write the book. Most of the time in fiction, you better write the book first if you're a debut author. But I highly recommend that. I've also done at least one episode, I think maybe two, on the submission to editorial to publication process. But I'm going to be diving a little bit more deeply into that this season because I'm seeing a lot of people, particularly with AI, blow-ups that have happened and books being pulled. It's more than one, but the one that everybody's talking about, at least on Threads this week, was Shy Girl. Future Stacy here. Apparently, I forgot to finish that sentence that I am going to be diving deeper into the editorial process, how editors work, what they do when they work with an author. Because with these AI blow-ups, there's a really weird conversation going on Threads, or at least there was at the time that I filmed this, that people thought that editors edit with AI and that editors completely rewrite your book. And that is just not how it works. And so I'm going to be talking about that this season a little bit more in depth. Just wanted to clarify that as I was editing because I realized I never came back to my point there. Oh my gosh, we are going to be talking about AI as well because There are so many books out there this year. I was just looking at a PW article about the number of books that were published in 2025 was more than 4 million. Here we go. The number of books published in the US in 2025 with ISBN numbers jumped 32.5% over 2024 to more than 4 million books, according to statistics compiled by Bowker. Of those, traditionally published books rose 6.6% from 602,428 in 2024 to 642,242. So what that means is that there are millions of books out there being published. I would say at least 1 million, if not more of them, are AI slop. They're just dreck. And if you're using AI in any way to write your book, we're going to discuss that more in depth to figure out what we mean by AI. And what I mean by that is generative AI, because there are copyright issues. You cannot copyright a book written by AI because you didn't write it. Somebody else did, because those generative models are stealing the content from authors who have published books. Multiple lawsuits about this. If you want to know more, we will go into it later this season. But also check out this conversation that we had last year with Martha Brokenbrough and Lori Fina, in which we talked about the difference between generative AI and machine learning and the ethics of using AI. And there's a golf place next door, so you might hear slams from time to time. But the ethics of using AI in writing, it's just, don't do it. Don't do it. You will need to, if you are trying to get traditionally published by any reputable publisher, there will be a clause in your contract that says you are required to let them know if you've used AI to create the book, because that means they cannot copyright it in your name. And that throws some major question marks into whether anybody should be able to make money on this. Speaking of money, I mean, also the authors who have been stolen from and the artists who have been stolen from should be compensated for that. But that is all stuff that we're going to be talking about later this season. We're also going to be talking with Elise McMullen-Chiatti. She's my colleague that I trained actually as an editor at Lee & Low, and now she runs the 2 Books imprint that I used to run for 15 years. She is also an author. She has her master's in, I forget exactly what it is, but it has to do with foodways. And we're going to be talking about foodways in literature. She has so much great information. We will be talking with Elise McMullen-Chiatti later in April or possibly early May. And we've got all these other events planned in the store that we will be recording and sharing on our podcast as well. So we're really excited to finally dive back into season 2. And now for this episode, I want to talk about the systems that I have been implementing. And one of the things that I've been concentrating on so deeply, other than trying to get well from that cold that lasted forever and kind of still is hanging on in a little bit of a cough. But now what we're going to talk about today is everything that I've been concentrating on for the last 2.5, 3 months. Really a little bit longer than that, but the thing that I've been doing other than running the store and working on getting better is that I have been working on implementing a system called a CRM. I use Zoho because that's the one that I'm familiar with. We used it at Lee & Low, and we had started implementing it in 2019, and it was a lifesaver when we went into March of 2020 and everybody had to start working from home. Because rather than having Excel sheets everywhere and all of our different systems, depending on what department we were in, all of our main information about each book was handled in a central location, and everybody had one source of truth for every single book. We had the ISBN and the price and the summary, and all of the information about any book lived in one place that anybody in the company could reference. And that's what I'm doing with my bookstore now, is getting our books, my bookkeeping system, into Zoho so I can drop QuickBooks Online. I'm getting my social media system into Zoho. So I was able to already drop our social media scheduler. I was able to drop Constant Contact. That's within the same system. And like I said, I'm using Zoho, but Zoho isn't the only CRM out there. There is HoneyBook for freelancers, and I know a lot of YouTube creators use HoneyBook. It wasn't quite what I needed for my system. The thing about a bookstore, or any retailer, but a bookstore in particular, is that we have particular needs. Oftentimes, when you are getting your education from a business educator, such as the WBDC, the Women's Business Development Council here in Connecticut, most states have one of them, or the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. They often have free classes. You should definitely look into them. But when I'm taking those classes, they're often talking about the difference between a product-based business and a service-based business. But when you're talking about a retailer, particularly a bookstore, we're both. We've got books. We've got products that we're selling, but we're not manufacturing those. We are bringing those in from the manufacturers, from the distributors, and we're curating them into one space. And that service of curation and convening, which is for our events, that's the convening of the community. We have book clubs, we have author events, we have all sorts of events in the store. I always forget the third C. There are 3 C's of the principles of running a bookstore: curation, convening, and I don't remember the third one, but I'm constantly using it in grant applications because it really describes what we do as a bookstore, which is not entirely a service and not entirely a product-based business. So I tell you that because what I need in a system that allows me to get organized and to have visibility into our numbers is going to be a little bit more complicated than if you're, a YouTube creator or a freelancer offering, say, design services or social media services. That service that you're offering might not be as complicated as me having. The last I checked, I have 15,000 separate SKUs in the store right now. So I need to keep track of my inventory and stay on top of it. And that's the reason why we are talking about systems today. Just last week, a couple of friends of mine were deeply affected by the closure of Dial, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Dial started as an independent publishing house and was absorbed by Penguin back in the 80s. I have a couple of friends who started out their careers there in the early 80s when it was a separate company. And then they moved to Penguin before it was Penguin Random House, because it only became Penguin Random House back in, I think it was 2015 or so. So anyway, I have a friend who was laid off as part of that. I have another friend over there whose imprint is going to be absorbing Dial, and already overworked editors who are remaining are going to be asked to take on even more work. That has a lot of implications for the authors and the artists who work with these imprints. Authors whose books are in progress in particular are going to be highly affected by, who's going to take on their books, who's going to champion their books in-house. As many of you know, I was laid off in September from my job at Lee & Low Books. And last month, I think it was, there was a layoff at Simon & Schuster. I think there have been other layoffs between mine and last week's at other houses. Just in general, right now, the book industry is feeling very precarious. I told you there are 4 million books published last year. And even though traditional publishing is feeling quite precarious, the number of traditionally published books also went up last year by about 6%. But everyone who is, just a regular worker in the industry is feeling highly squeezed by what's going on in publishing right now. On top of that, we have to deal with tariffs. Who knows with the unpredictability of what's going to be hit again, because they were declared unlawful, but now they're trying to put in tariffs under a different law. And books are generally exempted from tariffs, but we sell candles and stickers and bookmarks and all sorts of things that are affected by the tariffs. And then on top of that, now we're apparently at war with Iran, despite, it being illegal and Congress not being involved and not willing to stand up to blah, blah, blah. Everything we touch is affected by the price of oil, whether it includes petroleum in the product or not. So plastics, obviously petroleum-based, unless you're, using eco-friendly plastics that are corn-based. The corn takes petroleum to grow, to ship. Everything that we do is affected by the price of oil. Just in the last 2 weeks, our local gas here has gone up 75%. I know you've probably dealt with various other rises in costs as well. We have heating oil in the Northeast, so I'm glad we're going into a warm season because I might not be able to afford to heat my home anytime soon. I am seriously worried about what all of this greater world events means for whether my business might survive, to be quite honest. So what we are doing here in the bookstore is we're not going to allow ourselves to panic, though, I might ramble a bit in a panicky way and then I'll get to work. And so what I have been doing is I've been working on my systems. I have, at the moment, been working on this CRM system that I just told you about. And what that is helping me to do is to really get on top of inventory management, budget management, and to have greater visibility into my numbers. So I have a point of sale system. I've explained that to you before. You can check that out here. When I've talked about all the various things that if you're going to start a bookstore, here are the systems that you need to start out with. Well, we are in our 3rd year. The systems that I started with aren't necessarily the systems that are going to continue to work for me as we grow. We are a good 25% down in 2026 versus this time in 2025. We had 40% down in store sales for 2025 holiday season versus 2024. So when I say that everything that is in the economy overall is affecting us as a business, and I'm not the only one, I'm sure that you can understand that I am really reaching for the ways that I can save money. I look at the Abacus survey, which is from the American Booksellers Association, and I look at the percentages that the most profitable bookstores spend on each of a particular part of their business. So rent or employee wages or cost of goods, because, even that alone is anywhere from 50 to 60%. And so with that 40% left, how much are you spending on rent? What percentage of that are you spending on rent? What percentage are you spending on wages? What percentage are you spending on utilities and paying yourself so that you can eat and live? I look at those numbers and I know I am not there yet. But as I'm implementing this system, and I will be showing you some screenshots of what I'm working on, I'm going to have an analytics dashboard that allows me to see my seasonal ordering budget. Seasonal ordering is the biggest headache that I have because it is so hard to have true visibility on when bills are going to be coming due. The way that bills work, the way that bookstores have to pay their bills, if they're not paying cash up front, if they're on terms with a publisher or distributor, that means that they have anywhere from 30 to sometimes 120 days to pay their bill after the book arrives. They don't get billed until the book arrives. Well, when the book is shipped, not necessarily when it arrives. So it is March right now, and I am ordering for June, July, August, and into the fall. And what that means is I am not being billed right now for books that aren't going to be released until, say, August. But let's say that most of the books come out at the end of September and into the early part of November. If I have my largest bill in October and I have 120 days dating on it, which is 4 months. Yes, 4 months. Say most of those books come out in October or even 90 days dating. The clock starts ticking for that book in October, all of those books. And my bill of, let's say I get a $10,000 bill for the month of October for everything. Just to use a round number. And let's say I get some really good 60-day and 90-day dating for those books. What that means is most of those bills, if I have 60 to 90 days, even 120 days, is that the October bill is going to start coming in December and then January and February. And hopefully you're making a lot of money in December. So that's great, right? You've got the holiday shopping. You've got people buying gifts. It's great to be flush with money in December and be able to pay your bills. But what if $5,000 of that bill comes due in January after the cliff of holiday shopping falls off? Do you have the money to pay that bill? And the way to know that you're holding enough in reserve to pay those bills is to have visibility into when those bills are coming due. So what I am doing is I am putting my purchase orders, including the release date and all of that kind of stuff, the terms, because I might be getting a better discount if I'm ordering earlier enough or with the right promo code that my rep helps me to apply. And if I am applying that promo code correctly in my system, that means that I know exactly how much I'm going to owe in October, November, December, January, February. That means that even if my bill in October is quite low and I might be thinking, oh, I'm so flush with money, we're going in the holiday season and I've got extra money. What am I going to do with that extra money? Well, what I should be doing is putting it in savings if I know that I've got a bill coming due in January that I don't know we're going to make enough money in January to cover. So having this system where my inventory and my purchase orders and my sales information, so I can track what is selling and really get a vibe on what I need to be bringing in more of, that's what I'm doing with my CRM system. Other systems, though, that I want us to talk about, because it's not just the CRM. That's what I'm obsessing with right now. But we've got all these things going on. If you are thinking about your own business, which may be a bookstore, it might be another kind of store, you do have to worry about your point of sale system and your inventory tracking if you have inventory, your ordering system, which should be connected with your budgeting system in some way, your bookkeeping system, which should be connected to your budgeting system as well. I did not have those connected before, and this is why I'm implementing the system. But I'm also worried about events management. Given the circumstances that I've let you know about, like I actually had to let a couple of employees go in January. It was really hard. Events, they weren't doing what I needed them to do. I have a strategy that I'm trying to implement and it wasn't happening. So I am trying to rebuild our event system from the ground up and really grow it, because as I look at our inventory, as I look at our foot traffic and the sales that we get from that foot traffic, it's simply not enough. We have a website, we have great social media, and we have a book box that has really been taking off every month. Hey, and by the way, I'm going to link it below. I am so excited about that book box because we choose each month by theme. And next month, April's theme is Appalachian Cottagecore Fantasy, so you don't want to miss it. I'm going to link to that below if you want to subscribe. And that gives us a baseline of steady income so that we don't have to worry about it fluctuating too much. And events are another way that we can bring in foot traffic so that people can shop the store and know that we are here. We want to bring in authors that people get excited about. But also, we're only allowed 28 people here in the store as part of the fire code. I would feel uncomfortable getting too many more people in here anyway because it's not that big a space. Our shelves in the middle of the room do push back because they're on wheels, but it's just still quite a small space. So I'm actually looking for ways to create larger events that we can do either with community partners. We do already do community partner events with local libraries and with the American Mural Project. We had Sarah Beth Thirst doing an episode of this podcast over at Little Red Barn last fall, and that was a blast, though sound-wise it wasn't actually really great for the podcast, which is why I'm thinking about a more of a venue that is specifically for events like this. I'm looking at, for example, the Warner Theater in Torrington or Infinity Hall over in Norfolk. Though Infinity, if any of you watching this have any connection with Infinity Hall, they don't call me back. I've been trying to get a hold of them for months and they don't email or call me back. So I'm not really quite sure what's going on with that venue, but I'm getting quotes from various places, and I applied for a grant, the Ignite grant with the WBDC, because I'm hoping that that grant will allow us to pay for the venue and for the seed capital to pay deposits for venue and for travel expenses to bring in authors who might not be local to us so that we can bring in bigger name authors and really be a draw to the bookstore. And that means sustainability for us. Being able to sell a lot of books for an event, that's awesome, but also being able to perhaps even charge, a modest amount to see an author that they might not be able to see otherwise, they might not be able to easily travel to. We're bringing those people here to the northwest corner of Connecticut. That could mean the difference between just barely surviving to thriving. And that's what I mean by creating systems to put into place that make your business more sustainable in the hard times. I'm also thinking about, for example, and these are departments, obviously, events is a department, marketing is a department, but I'm also thinking about systems that make it easier for the work to get done in an efficient way. And so I'm thinking about how we are creating systems around our marketing, both social media, here on the podcast, because this is kind of a marketing thing as well as informational and community building, and how I need to get better at my newsletter. I have not been sending out a regular events newsletter for a couple of months because I've just had so many other things going on. I am trying to do most of this myself right now, and I really need to, come spring, be hiring perhaps an assistant manager, perhaps an events coordinator. I am not sure what that's going to look like yet, but I have to have the financial part of it in place to feel comfortable hiring someone who I hope will help us to take it to the next level as well, and to be able to take on some of the work and help us to become more profitable. But they kind of have to go hand in hand. And I need to get those pieces into place to be able to find the right person who is going to actually help me implement the strategies that I have been working on. Systems within your business are not the only systems that we all need to be worrying about. Because, as I said, there are world events that we don't have a whole lot of control over whether the Strait of Hormuz is open to, tanker traffic or not. But we can be looking at our local governments. We can be looking at connecting with our community. And actually, that brings up that we are going to be working with our local Indivisible chapter to be hosting an Exploring Democracy book club. We're starting that in April. More details will be on our events soon. And we're going to be reading On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder first. And everyone, including me, usually talks about Principle 1 in this book, do not obey in advance. But the thing about this book club is that it really is hitting Principle 13, which is to practice corporeal politics. Get involved locally. Meet people who might not be in your immediate orbit. Meet people who you might not have known otherwise if you didn't go to a book club, if you didn't go to a community event. Getting to know your neighbors is a big part of helping to protect everything that we care about in this business, which is the First Amendment, our right to free expression. Bookstores are bastions of free expression. Libraries, education. Like right now, there are so many localities where their school boards or their library boards have started restricting access to specific books. And right now, nationally, HR 7661 has been introduced to attempt to ban books nationally. Here on the local level, you can have conversations with your neighbors. And I really feel like the way that I'm able to connect with people who might not agree with me on everything here locally, in the store, in person, opens up doors and opens up hearts and opens up my own heart in a way that the national political side of things doesn't really allow for right now. And so while I really think it's important, and I urge us all to be calling our representatives, especially if you've got a Republican representative, about HR 7661, I also think that as we get involved in our local school boards, our local library boards, local government, in whatever way. If you care about economic development, get involved in your Chamber of Commerce, get involved in your town's Economic Development Committee. That's what they're called here in Connecticut. I'm not sure what they're called in other places, but all of those are ways of being civically responsible, getting civically engaged in the systems that your business is a part of. Get involved in your local school if you have kids. There are all sorts of ways that we can get involved locally, whether that's as volunteers, running for office, attending town council meetings, attending your county or whatever next level of board meetings. Getting involved in your local governmental processes allows us to know what's going on enough so that we can know how it's going to affect our businesses. You're going to be, thinking about how state laws and state tourism, that's a system. If you're running a bookstore and you want more people to be coming to your town to create foot traffic in your town, Winstead is a small town. There are, I think, about 8,000 people in the entire town of Winchester, Winstead is the city within the town of Winchester, which is a little bit larger. We have counties in Connecticut, but the government is at the town level, not the county level. I'm not even sure how county administration works in Connecticut. I'm not sure that it works in the way that I'm familiar with when it comes to county government in Illinois, where I'm from. So the town tends to be the body of government that we're paying attention to here in Connecticut. And so if your town or the city that you're in doesn't have enough people in it to have enough foot traffic to support your bookstore, you are looking at ways of bringing people in from a little bit further out. So these events, when Sarah Beth Durst came here last fall, we had people come from as far away as Worcester, Massachusetts. That is a 2-hour drive. It's just outside of Boston. That stunned me that people were willing to drive that far. But if you have somebody who is a draw to your town, people are going to be willing to drive there. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about as I'm planning my events. And I'm also thinking about that as I'm talking with our local leaders saying, hey, what can we do to encourage people to use these great hiking trails and then come eat on Main Street and maybe browse the bookstore? That kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things that are a little bit larger system than just your store. Get to know your other local business owners, make friends, look for ways that you can help each other cross-promote. These are all ways of getting involved in our communities that are systems beyond the systems that you implement in your store. And then there's, of course, on the national level here in the US, there are so many things happening right now. There's just so much to keep track of. But if you're in the book industry, a big thing that we're thinking about is the First Amendment, because the school and library market has pretty much collapsed. The thing about children's literature is that it really depends on the school and library market. And book banning and obeying in advance, all of the things that are happening on a state and local level have really affected the children's book industry right now. And that gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the layoffs happening in the book industry and what that means for the quality of books that we might be getting into a bookstore, whether our local schools are going to be able to provide the books that they need for those kids because they might be worried about, in some places, they're worried about being arrested for providing normal books for children. So thankfully, we're not dealing with that here, but a lot of places are thinking about implementing freedom to read laws. I'm not sure. I think Massachusetts has one. I think we passed it in Connecticut. I think New York is working on one, or vice versa with Mass and New York. I forget the exact details, but freedom to read laws protect against librarians getting arrested for a book challenge and all of those kinds of things that 10 years ago, I don't think any of us, especially us working in diverse books, really anticipated being anything to worry about. Advocating for First Amendment protections for librarians, booksellers, and educators is so important. And advocating for the right for women and LGBTQ people to have access to the vote. The Save America Act is still in play right now as we speak in Congress. I see a lot of people saying, oh, it just doesn't have the votes. It doesn't have the votes. But There is a lot of maneuvering happening right now, and the Save America Act will require proof of citizenship to vote. A lot of people are like, okay, that's fine. I'll just show my driver's license. But your driver's license, even a real ID, is not proof of citizenship. There are certain kinds of legal immigrants who are also allowed a real ID. So you would either have to have your birth certificate or your passport that reflects your name at birth and any name changes along the way. How many people know where their birth certificate is, particularly when we're thinking about our elders? There are a lot of elders who were born at home, or particularly that they were born in Jim Crow era and were not allowed in the White Hospital. So did they have a birth certificate? Maybe their house burned down. That costs money. A passport costs money, and that is a poll tax. The whole aim of this is to disenfranchise the 20 plus million people who don't have access to these documents. I'm actually not sure that I have the right kind of birth certificate in my house. I have my birth certificate that is in like an album that my mom made for me, but I'm not sure it's the like official with the stamp and the seal and all that kind of stuff. And my passport is, I really need to renew my passport, but I haven't had the money to renew it. So I am thinking about this even though I've never changed my name. But if you have ever changed your name as a married woman or in any other way changed your name, you have to have like a whole trail of documents proving your citizenship. The reason why I bring this up is because everything else in our democracy depends on that, including our right to free expression and our right to read. Me being able to have the right systems in my business to make a profit doesn't matter if I don't have the right to vote, and this is no longer a democracy. So I just want you to be thinking about all of the systems that we live within. And yeah, I am really thinking about how to survive right now. I'm really thinking about how do I implement systems that help me to survive and possibly thrive and to make a positive influence in my community. But everything that's outside of all these things also affect my business and my ability to continue to pay my mortgage, my ability to feed myself on a regular basis. And I'm sure a lot of you are also dealing with similar worries and fears. So it's not enough just to put your head down and concentrate on your business. We have to be thinking about these levels of systems that we live within and looking for ways that we can participate to make a difference in those systems. I guess I just want to leave you with, I am definitely going to continue to obsess over my inventory and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's something that I have control over. I'm going to attend the protest next weekend, the No Kings 3 protest. If you're local, I hope to see you there. And if you are unable to make it, we've got postcards to swing states here on tables every Saturday until we finish them or the deadline has hit. We've still got more to go. So even though we said 3 Saturdays in March, next Saturday, if you can't make it to the protest, if you can't make it all the way down to Torrington or wherever any of the rest of the protests are, definitely come by and fill out some postcards. Whatever you can do, make sure that you do it. Make sure that you are having those conversations with your community and that you are connecting with your community and getting to know your neighbors. Every single part of this will help us to overcome the hard times and get through them. The reality is, I care about making money so that I can live. I'm not out here to like make $1 million. It'd be lovely to be able to afford all my medical bills and all my dental bills and my, living expenses and all that, and still have money left over to put toward good causes. But I think most of us are in the same boat of, we just want to do good in the world while we're here. And I feel like bookstores are a major bastion of being able to do that. So the more that I can implement these systems to help me along and let you know about them, and hopefully that they are useful to you, I'm going to share them. So join us next time. We are going to be talking with my friend Jennifer Gonzalez, and we are going to be talking about, Jen does consulting with nonprofits, but they also help me on working on grant applications for my business. And so they helped me to get my NHE3 grant last fall, which got us computers for the front desk and in the back. And now I just applied for the Ignite grant. Like I said, hopefully, fingers crossed that they'll help us to launch a bigger version of our events program. And Jen was the clear head that helped me to look at the grant process as not as overwhelming as it could be, and really boil down how to pitch what I'm trying to do in a way that the grant program understands that it will make an impact, the impact that they want to make in the community, economic development, etc., etc. So join us next time for that. It's already filmed. I just need to edit it. So I'll try and do that as quickly as possible, and join us for the rest of the season. Please like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And please share these episodes that I've been pointing out with anyone you think who might find the information useful and interesting. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.